What was intended to be a joyful family camping trip, filled with laughter, s'mores, and nights under the stars, turned into an unthinkable nightmare for the Schmidt family. In the early hours of July 22, 2022, an unknown attacker brutally took the lives of 3 family members while they slept inside their tent. The shocking tragedy rippled through the community, leaving everyone grappling with the question of who could commit such a horrific act. In this video, we'll delve into the details of this devastating case and seek to understand the events that led to the loss of 3 innocent lives. This is the chilling story of the Schmidt family. Tyler Schmidt was born on November 13, 1979, in Iowa, USA, and grew up in Cedar Falls, a city recognized for hosting the University of Northern Iowa. From an early age, Tyler was involved in the Boy Scouts, ultimately earning the prestigious rank of Eagle Scout. This experience sparked a lifelong passion for nature and camping. He particularly cherished the camps organized by the Lutheran Church, which fostered family connections and communal gatherings. Although he dabbled in playing the trumpet during his free time, Tyler's true passions were adventure and sports. He competed in cross-country running and was an active member of the swim team at Northern Iowa High School in Cedar Falls. Beyond school sports, he loved canoeing, hiking, and snowshoeing. His fascination with computers eventually led him to Missouri, where he pursued a degree in computer science at Truman State University. It was there that he not only completed his studies but also met Sarah, who would later become his wife. Sarah was born on March 27, 1980, in Kansas City and spent part of her childhood near St. Louis with her siblings, Karen, Jane, and Adam. She shared Tyler's enthusiasm for the outdoors, particularly bird watching and studying insects. Like Tyler, she was a Girl Scout and achieved the organization's highest honor, the Gold Award. Sarah's adventurous nature came from her mother, with whom she went backpacking across Central America. It was clear to Tyler from the moment they met that she was his soulmate. As a student, Sarah excelled academically and also took the lead on projects designed to enhance student life at her school. Sarah's natural leadership and dedication earned her the prestigious Truman Scholarship while she was still at Washington High School in Washington, Missouri. This honor paved the way for her attendance at Truman State University, where she met Tyler. The two quickly fell in love, began dating, and Sarah happily accepted his proposal of marriage. Both families wholeheartedly supported their union, recognizing that Tyler and Sarah were perfectly matched and destined to create a loving family together. On Saturday, June 22, 2002, friends and family began arriving at St. John Lutheran Church in Cedar Falls, dressed elegantly for the special occasion. Guests took their seats according to the seating arrangements, with Tyler's parents and Sarah's mother alongside her siblings seated at the front. Tyler's uncles and cousins were nearby. Outside the church, Sarah prepared for her entrance, accompanied by her father, who was ready to walk her down the aisle and give her away to her soon-to-be husband. On that day, 22-year-old Tyler and Sarah exchanged their vows, pledging to remain together for the rest of their lives. United by their mutual love of nature, they chose the Boundary Waters, a renowned wilderness region straddling the US-Canada border between Minnesota and Ontario, as the destination for their 10-day honeymoon. A quick note before we continue. As you know, on Uncover Eyes, we release new videos every other day. Many of you have reached out expressing a desire for daily content, so we've launched a new channel, also focused on real-life crime stories, called Secret Crime Mysteries. On the days we don't post videos on Uncover Eyes, we'll be uploading them on Secret Crime Mysteries. This means if you're looking for daily doses of astonishing real-life crime cases, don't hesitate to subscribe. Without further ado, let's dive into today's case. During the first decade of their marriage, Tyler and Sarah focused on building financial stability and advancing their careers. After completing their bachelor's degrees in Missouri, they relocated to Lawrence to pursue master's degrees at the University of Kansas, where Sarah eventually found employment. Tyler, a skilled computer scientist, worked for a supermarket, a delivery company, and UPS, and spent 18 years at a firm specializing in business-to-business billing and payments. Despite their professional commitments, the early years of the Schmidts' marriage were marked by adventure and shared experiences. They made it a point to spend quality time together, exploring new natural landscapes whenever possible. Family and friends often gathered to enjoy their mutual love of board games, and the couple occasionally participated in events organized by their Lutheran church community. As devoted fans of the Kansas Jayhawks, they also supported basketball tournaments at Allen Fieldhouse. The year 2013 was bittersweet for the couple. On one hand, Sarah's father passed away from a heart attack, a significant loss for his loved ones. On the other hand, after 11 years of marriage, the couple welcomed their first child, Arlo. 3 years later, on September 17, 2015, they experienced the joy of parenthood again with the birth of a beautiful daughter, Lula Schmidt. When Arlo was 6 and Lula was 3, the family moved to Cedar Falls to be closer to Tyler's relatives. Cedar Falls welcomed them warmly, and they soon became active members of the community. Tyler continued working as a software engineer while Sarah started working as an assistant at the city's public library, and the children enrolled in Lincoln Elementary School's preschool. Tyler and Sarah were known for their kindness and willingness to help others, making everyone around them feel important. This commitment earned them the affection of their neighbors and the entire community. The same was true at the library where Sarah worked. Her warmth and friendly demeanor quickly made her well known and appreciated both inside and outside the library. The couple made sure to instill in Arlo and Lula the same passion they had for outdoor activities and nature. In 2021, they began camping with their children, and despite their busy schedules, the children loved these outings so much that the parents made time for them whenever possible. By mid-2022, Sarah was working long hours. Nevertheless, in June, she took a day off to celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary and planned to take another day in July to go on a family vacation. She had to finish a project for the library before July 26th, but was determined not to let it interfere with the family's plans. During the week of July 11th, Sarah mentioned to Katie, her brother Adam's wife, that she would be camping with the children at Maquoketa Cave State Park, a popular destination for hikers and explorers in Jackson County, Iowa, famous for its impressive caves and stunning natural landscapes. On Thursday, July 21st, the family packed their car and drove roughly 140 miles to reach Maquoketa Caves. Tyler and Sarah, both 42, along with their children Arlo, 9, and Lula, 7, arrived at the campsite before 5 p.m. The camping area was packed, so the Schmidts set up near the park's entrance. A few hours later, around 7 p.m., another family parked about 200 feet from their tent. This was Joe and Cecilia Sherwin and their 23-year-old son, Anthony Sherwin, from Nebraska. The Sherwins set up 2 tents, one for the parents and another for their son. They were on their way home after a week-and-a-half camping trip that took them to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. The journey had been enjoyable and had strengthened the bond between Joe, Cecilia, and Anthony. Anthony was always attentive to his parents' needs, and his mother often said he was the best son she could have wished for, kind, sensitive, and an exceptional student. That year, Anthony was working on a computerized system to support a business he claimed was worth millions. He mentioned that part of the profits would be used to help his parents financially. Cecilia knew little about the project because Anthony kept the details of the mysterious business to himself, only mentioning that he sent emails under strict security. As night fell at Maquoketa Caves, the campers settled into their tents. Before dawn on July 22nd, the park's visitors were jolted awake by the sound of gunshots. Just before the commotion, a man dressed in black entered the Schmidt's tent and attacked Tyler and then Sarah. Arlo, who had been asleep, woke up to the sound of his sister Lula's screams. As he turned, he saw blood inside the tent. Terrified, he managed to escape and ran to seek help. As he fled, he heard one last shot. Cecilia and Joe, in the neighboring campsite, rushed out of their tent amid the confusion. Joe searched for his son among the campers, asking if anyone had seen him. Arlo, still frantic, ran until he encountered the Sherwins. He was screaming and asking for help, saying his parents had been shot. Cecilia took his hand and ran with him to the park entrance. Once there, terrified and unsure of what had happened, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. She was worried because her son was sleeping near the tent where the shots had come from and feared he might be among the victims. The Jackson County 911 operator understood when Cecilia reported hearing gunshots, but she struggled to pronounce the park's name, making it hard to convey the location. She also explained she was with a boy claiming his parents had been shot. The call between Cecilia and 911 lasted 23 minutes. While she answered questions, the operator relayed the attack to the police and park rangers. Although the call was briefly disconnected, Cecilia persisted and called back, only to be put on hold while the dispatcher contacted emergency responders. Despite the tension and nervousness in the park, adrenaline helped Cecilia stay calm. After providing details about their exact location, she handed the phone to Arlo. The boy explained to the dispatcher that he was in a tent with his mom, sister, and dad, and when he woke up, he saw someone dressed in black holding a gun. The 911 operator asked the child where his father was, and after a pause, he responded that he thought his father was hurt. Around 6:30 a.m., police officers and paramedics arrived at the scene and headed to the Schmidt's tent. What they found was horrifying. All the occupants of the tent were dead. The beautiful campsite had turned into a crime scene. Law enforcement immediately began searching for the shooter, knowing he could be anywhere. The tactical team quickly evacuated Makokata Cave State Park and Camp Shalom, a Christian summer camp located about 1.5 miles from the site of the attack. As officials evacuated the visitors, they gathered them outside the park. Once everyone was accounted for, it was confirmed that only one person was missing, Anthony Sherwin. He was not only missing, but also armed. At 11 a.m., police officers conducting an aerial search spotted a man's body. When they reached him, they found he was deceased. It was Anthony. Although investigations were necessary, the police identified him as the suspect in the homicides. They believed he had committed the deadly attack on the Schmidts and then taken his own life. The incident led authorities to close the park, a measure that remained in effect until July 28th. The Iowa Department of Natural Resources expressed its condolences for the incident. Their spokesperson issued a statement saying she and the entire team were devastated by the event, which had shaken the tradition of enjoying the state's natural wonders. But the legacy would continue for the millions of families who recreate in Iowa's parks. Citizens of Cedar Falls heard the news. They were shocked. The atmosphere changed suddenly, as if a gray veil had covered the sky. The reactions of family, friends, acquaintances, and even those who didn't know the victims were filled with pain. Cedar Falls was in mourning. In one of the windows of the Cedar Falls Public Library where Sarah worked, a sign was placed with a message saying that Tyler, Sarah, and Lula had left too soon but would always be in their hearts. The company where Tyler worked as a software engineer issued a statement describing him as a consummate professional and a mentor to his colleagues who were devastated when they heard about the tragedy. They knew of the love Tyler had for his children and his dedication to sharing his knowledge with little Arlo. The mayor of Cedar Falls also expressed his devastation over the loss of 3 beloved community members on his Facebook wall. He knew Sarah well as they had worked together on a tech project. The mayor also urged the residents of Cedar Falls to be generous towards Arlo, the sole survivor of the family, who was safe, and he shared a GoFundMe link for those wishing to donate. Within a few days, the initiative had raised over $276,000. In response to the tragedy, the local authority ordered the closure of the library for the rest of the day out of respect for Sarah's co-workers. The tragedy also elicited reactions from other political leaders. The Iowa governor expressed her horror at the attack and sorrow for the unimaginable tragedy. And a U.S. House representative from Iowa tweeted that it was a senseless and horrific crime. Sarah's family was heartbroken. Her sister said she felt her life had been shattered, unable to believe that Sarah would no longer be just a phone call away and that she wouldn't see her niece grow up. Sarah's family traveled from North Dakota, Texas, and Michigan to join the rest of the family for the private funeral service held at Greenwood Cemetery. On August 2nd, a gathering was held to celebrate the lives of Tyler, Sarah, and Lula at the picnic area of Overman Park. More than 200 people attended. Several attendees, including Tyler's aunt and the mayor, spoke at the podium set up for the occasion, sharing their feelings and memories of the deceased. The mayor concluded the speeches by confessing that he had once envisioned Sarah with her heart dedicated to the community, representing Cedar Falls politically in the future. While the loved ones of the Schmidts dealt with their grief and tried to provide comfort and attention to Arlo, authorities continued their investigation into the horrific crime. According to information released by the Iowa Department of Public Safety based on autopsy findings, Tyler had a gunshot wound and multiple sharp force injuries. His wife Sarah had only sharp force injuries, while their young daughter had been both shot and strangled. In early August 2022, authorities released official information on the case, naming Anthony Sherwin as the person responsible for the Schmidt family's murder. According to the police, the 23-year-old, who had no prior criminal record, was the sole person involved in the incident before taking his own life. The investigation did not reveal any motive for the attack. The assistant director of the Division of Criminal Investigation stated that no connection was established between Anthony and the Schmidt family prior to that fateful day or during their time as neighboring campers. The police department in Nebraska assisted with the investigation. When officers searched the Sherwin family apartment in Nebraska, they found no suicide note or any indication that could explain why Anthony targeted the Schmidt family and himself. His Facebook page was also void of any clues, as it was completely blank. Regarding the weapons used by the attacker, the assistant director of the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation mentioned only one: a hand-assembled firearm which was recovered near Anthony's body. These types of weapons, also known as ghost guns, are built by individuals, often using parts purchased online without any restrictions. Since they lack serial numbers, they are difficult to regulate and trace. Seeking to confirm this information, the Des Moines Register contacted Anthony's parents, who confirmed that their son had built his own weapon using information found online. They explained that he did it as a challenge rather than out of a specific desire to own a gun. They also emphasized that Anthony was very responsible and had never harmed another person or animal. Cecilia asserted that their family had never owned guns and that they had decided to acquire them due to the rising crime rates in Nebraska. She added that due to their lack of experience, they even took classes to learn how to handle them. The parents explained that they brought the homemade gun on the trip for protection against crime and possibly bear attacks, as they had experienced one night while camping. They also mentioned their intention to dispose of it upon returning home. Anthony's parents set out to prove their son's innocence, convinced that he was a victim of homicide and not the killer. According to Anthony's mother, an independently obtained autopsy report indicated that he had been shot twice, not once as claimed by the police. She suspected that the first shot was meant to incapacitate him, but she could not understand how he managed to shoot himself a second time, challenging the authorities' theory of suicide. Another point they raised was the color of the clothing the attacker was wearing. Cecilia recalled telling the 911 operator that the assailant was dressed in black, which did not match what her son was wearing. Green shorts she had given him the day before the tragedy. Additionally, Cecilia and Joe reported that the police did not disclose where Anthony's body was found, or whether the weapon he allegedly used to take his own life was the same one used against the Schmidts. When they specifically asked investigators if a ballistic test had been conducted to confirm matches, they received no answers. All these concerns were outlined in an email Cecilia sent to the media. In the message, she stated that her son had too many reasons to live and she was certain he would not abandon everything in such a manner. They had not seen any signs of him planning such an attack. In her opinion, Anthony was incapable of killing and had no connection to the Schmidt family. According to the grieving mother, the investigators only responded that it was a random murder. Anthony's parents requested the final investigation report to commission an independent review, but claimed they received no response to this request. In January 2023, a media outlet reported that it had requested public records of the case, adhering to Iowa's Open Records Law and the Freedom of Information Act. The request referenced incident reports, investigation documents, crime scene summaries, and autopsy reports. Devin McClone, from the Office of the Iowa Department of Public Safety Commissioner, responded that the requested records were not public and they could only share the immediate facts and circumstances of the case, which were included in the links provided in the press release. A few days later, the media outlet sent an email to the official inquiring whether the weapon Anthony used to take his own life matched the one used in the murders. She did not respond. Unless new evidence surfaces to the contrary, The police maintained that Anthony Sherwin was a random killer who viciously shot, stabbed, and strangled 3 beloved members of a Cedar Falls family. In contrast, Cecilia and Joe believe their son, whom they described as a kind and studious individual, is innocent and another murder victim. They vowed to continue their efforts to prove his innocence. After his traumatic experience, Arlo, the only survivor of the massacre, was taken in by his family in Cedar Falls, specifically Sarah's brother. In an exclusive interview with a local newspaper, Sarah's brother stated that his nephew had been very brave and was in excellent mental health. The GoFundMe page created after the tragedy continues to receive donations to support Arlo's upbringing and to establish an educational fund for his future. Case of Alan Wade. High school sweethearts James Reggie Sooner and Carol Alford hailed from Charleston, South Carolina. They grew up together, same school, same grade, knowing each other since childhood. Over time, their friendship evolved into something deeper. By 1959, at 15 years old, they were dating. Friends often remarked on how harmonious and beautiful James and Carol seemed together. They captured these moments in photos. Young and happy, with dreams of a long and joyful life ahead. It was their first deep connection. The pair became almost inseparable, both in school and out. They seriously thought about marriage once they turned 18, a decision supported by their parents. But life had other plans. In 1962, just after graduating high school, James was drafted into military service. He and Carol decided to delay their wedding until his return, and promised to exchange letters regularly. Time moved on and separation became lengthy. By mid-60s, James found himself deployed to Vietnam, a hotspot, and all contact was lost thereafter. Had no word if her beloved was even alive. Carol faced significant challenges in her life, starting when he stopped writing to her. She chose to further her education while simultaneously securing employment at the Charleston Air Force Base. Eventually, Carol married, but this first marriage ended quickly without any children. In 1975, she entered into a second marriage with Richard Alford, and in 1977 they had a daughter named Rhonda. Unfortunately, the second marriage also proved unsuccessful due to Richard's excessive drinking and physical abuse. By the mid-1980s, Carol could no longer endure the ongoing abuse. She took her daughter and filed for divorce. However, Richard continued to harass and pursue her relentlessly. In 1987, his behavior reached a critical point. Richard purchased a handgun, consumed a large amount of alcohol, and went to confront Carol. On that fateful day, Richard rang Carol's doorbell. She unsuspectingly opened the door while Rhonda was in the room behind her. Despite his daughter's presence, Richard drew his gun and shot Carol multiple times in front of Rhonda. He then left the scene, drove to a deserted area, and committed suicide by shooting himself. Carol was fortunate to survive due to neighbors hearing the gunshots and Rhonda's desperate cries for help. They promptly called for an ambulance and alerted the police. Carol was in critical condition after losing significant blood. She underwent numerous complex surgeries and blood transfusions over several days before beginning her recovery. Although she gradually regained strength, she became permanently blind in her right eye and disabled for life. Toward the late 1990s, Carol's health deteriorated seriously once more. She experienced severe weight loss along with persistent pain and weakness, which prompted a thorough medical examination at the hospital. Despite enduring these substantial physical and emotional hardships throughout her life, Carol's resilience shone through as she navigated each challenge thrown her way. In 1987, received a distressing diagnosis of liver cancer. During her treatment, she was inadvertently infected with the hepatitis C virus, which went undetected and untreated. The virus silently damaged her liver over the years, ultimately leading to cancer. However, due to appropriate treatment and supportive therapy, Carol's condition was stabilized. She was required to take her prescribed medications daily for the rest of her life and undergo regular medical checkups to make necessary adjustments to her treatment plan. Carol faced additional challenges after losing her job at the Air Force Base due to severe gunshot wounds. With the added burden of cancer, she was no longer able to perform physically demanding tasks or remain on her feet for extended periods. Consequently, she took a position as a call center operator for a cable TV company in Charleston, her hometown. On the other hand, James experienced his own set of hardships in Vietnam. He was severely wounded during the war and almost lost his leg, requiring a prolonged hospital stay. His name was mistakenly included in lists of the deceased, leading even his relatives to believe he had died. Fortunately, he survived and eventually returned home years later. By that time, he had lost contact with Carol. She had moved residences, married, and believed that James had perished in the conflict. Although James later married, severe injuries from the war led to diabetes and several chronic conditions, which prevented him from becoming a father. His marriage ended after a few years, leaving him living alone since then. He found employment as a laborer on the local railroad, but expected no further pleasant surprises from life. In fall 2000, while Carol was performing her duties at the call center, answering phones and providing customer advice, she encountered another caller whose voice sounded unnervingly familiar. This voice elicited an emotional response within her that she could not ignore. Carol immediately recognized her first high school love, but she was hesitant to act on it because she believed James was dead. She answered all the customers' questions and then suddenly turned to him, saying his full name. Silence hung in the air for a moment. The man timidly asked how she knew his name. Carol began to cry and responded that she was the girl he had dated in high school, the girl he once wanted to marry. For the next few, they both cried into the phone, unable to find words. They soon discovered that they still lived in their hometown and agreed to meet the next evening. Meeting again after 38 years, according to Rhonda's recollection, her mother came home from work that day, looking excited like a schoolgirl and talking nonstop about James. The next day, Carol prepared diligently for the date, trying on dresses, doing her hair and makeup. She realized that she was no longer the young beauty James remembered, but wanted to look her best and win back his heart. Their reunion was exciting. They hadn't seen each other in 38 years. They talked endlessly about everything, the highlights and sorrows of their lives, failed marriages, work issues, and health problems. They reminisced about their happy times together. Their old feelings reignited and James and Carol were eager to make up for lost time. They began seeing each other daily and decided just a couple of weeks later to live together. 5 months later, they married and Carol moved into her new husband's home in Riverland Terrace neighborhood. Family life brought its own set of joys and challenges. The couple first resided in their native Charleston, South Carolina. In love and happy, they engaged in everyday life activities and took care of each other, especially since both were aging with health concerns. Next door lived the Cole family, a longtime acquaintance of James. Stephen Cole had also served in Vietnam, where he was severely wounded and now used a wheelchair. His wife Natalie seemed often absent due to work commitments, and preferred socializing with friends over spending time at home. In a bar somewhere, their daughter Tiffany would typically hang around on the street with nothing to do and money for even small pocket expenses. When James and Carol first started living together, Tiffany was still in high school. Good-natured Carol immediately felt a connection with the neighbor girl. She genuinely felt sorry for Tiffany, who seemed unwanted by her own mother. Over 5 years, did everything possible to support Tiffany. Carol invited her to family lunches and dinners, where delicious food was served, periodically bought clothes for the girl, and even provided small amounts of money for minor expenses. Carol treated Tiffany like she was her own daughter, surrounding her with care and attention. In 2004, the Summers decided to sell their Chevrolet Lumina minivan. Tiffany expressed interest in buying it through installments, since she had no money but needed the car desperately. The couple decided to sell it to her at a very low price and divided the payment into manageable amounts, stretched over a whole year. Early in 2005, the Sumners decided to relocate to Florida due to health issues that had significantly worsened for both spouses. Doctors advised them to move south near the ocean for better health conditions. By then both were retired, so they chose to make this significant life change. And James sold their spacious home in Charleston and bought property in Jacksonville, the largest city in Florida, where they also purchased a new Lincoln Town car. The couple was extremely happy and settled into their new place while making plans for their future life together. Every day, Carol called her adult daughter Rhonda. She shared everything about what was going on in her life, thoughts and plans included. So when communication ceased, Rhonda was both surprised and deeply concerned. In June 2005, Rhonda became concerned when her mother failed to call her as usual and didn't answer her calls either. Initially, she pushed away negative thoughts and hoped everything was fine with her mom and stepdad. She thought they might get in touch soon. However, the following day brought no change in there. Rhonda called both her mother's and James' cell phones every half hour, but they were now unreachable and voicemail messages went unanswered. On the third day, Rhonda decided it was time to take action. She chose to drive to another state to personally check if her mother and stepfather were all right. She started early in the morning for a 5-hour drive to reach the Summers' home. Upon arrival, the first thing she noticed was that their car was missing, which seemed unusual. Approaching the front door, she found it slightly open. Inside the house was eerily quiet, despite a light being on in one of the rooms while sunlight streamed outside. Rhonda called out loudly for her mother and James, but heard nothing in response. Entering the kitchen next, she saw a table set for two with food that appeared untouched for at least 3 days. It looked like they were about to have dinner, but abruptly left it unfinished. The house itself was in disarray. Things were scattered around randomly, and some doors and cupboards were open as if someone had frantically searched through them. Rhonda's concern grew when she spotted crucial medications on a bedside table in their bedroom. Her mother's cancer pills, taken 3 times daily, and James' insulin, administered hourly, remained there untouched along with completely dead phones. Given these observations, medications left behind, and no cell phone usage, it became clear that her mother and stepfather couldn't have gone far or been away for long without these essentials. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Rhonda immediately contacted the police to report their disappearance under what seemed like strange circumstances. The couple's vehicle was promptly included on the wanted list. All bank cards belonging to Carol and James were blocked the same day. The initial days of the search yielded no significant results. It was impossible to locate either the Sumners themselves or any witnesses. However, on June 12th, several events transpired simultaneously, enabling the police to pick up the trail of the criminals. Firstly, a man phoned one of the banks, identified himself as Mr. James Sooner, and complained about his card being blocked, making it impossible for him to withdraw cash. Upon verifying the card information, the bank employee immediately suspected something amiss. The employee suggested that Mr. Sooner personally visit the nearest bank branch to resolve the issue, but the man abruptly hung up. A few minutes later, from the same number yet directed at another bank, a woman identifying herself as Mrs. Carol Sooner called and reported a similar problem with her card being blocked. When she was asked to visit the bank in person, she categorically refused, citing health reasons and emphasizing her immediate need for access to her funds. Naturally, this request was denied. The information regarding these calls and recordings of them were immediately handed over to law enforcement. The same day at the station, these recordings were played for Rhonda, who confidently stated that neither voice belonged to her mother or stepfather. This was evident from the outset as both individuals were in their 60s while the voices sounded much younger. Police promptly hypothesized that these imposters were directly connected to the disappearance of the Sumners. They suspected that either these individuals had kidnapped Carol and James and were holding them somewhere against their will, or had possibly killed them after coercing information about their bank accounts and cards. A few days later, the missing couple's car was discovered abandoned on a deserted road in a wooded area. There were no traces of blood or signs of struggle in the cabin. Experts found hair and sweat marks in the trunk, which belonged to both spouses. It became evident that the owners had been taken away in the trunk of their own car, and prospects of finding them alive were grim. Upon examining the couple's bank transactions, it was revealed that money had been withdrawn from their cards several times after they ceased contacting their daughter. Reviewing the ATM surveillance footage showed that a young man, who couldn't be identified immediately, made the withdrawals. Additionally, a request was made to trace all calls from the number used by the imposters to contact the bank. The SIM card itself was purchased with prepaid time shortly before the disappearance of the couple. Attempts to establish the buyer's identity failed. However, it was discovered that on June 6th, a call was made from this number to a car rental company. It turned out that a guest at one of the hotels rented a Mazda RX-8 under the name Tiffany Cole. This same car was subsequently driven by an unidentified young man who withdrew money from ATMs using cards belonging to the missing individuals. He withdrew $1,000 from one card and nearly $3,000 from another. Thanks to built-in location trackers in rental cars, investigators determined that this Mazda RX-8 had parked at a hotel in Charleston. A capture team was promptly dispatched and forcefully entered the room where these individuals were staying. The room was strewn with packages and receipts from various stores, including clothes, gadgets, video games, cosmetics, perfumes, and expensive alcohol. Inside were 3 individuals: 23-year-old Tiffany Cole, her 24-year-old boyfriend Michael Jackson, and 19-year-old Alan Lindell Wade. The young men appeared surprised and confused as police placed handcuffs on their wrists. All 3 individuals were taken to the police station and placed in separate rooms for questioning. Initially, they pretended not to understand the accusations against them or simply remained silent. A search of their room uncovered several items belonging to the Sumners, including their bank cards, a laptop, some of Carol's jewelry, James' expensive coin collection, keys to their Lincoln Town car, and pawn shop receipts in the name of Cole. It was discovered that part of the stolen jewelry had been pawned by Tiffany and the money spent with friends. After several hours of interrogation and upon being presented with irrefutable evidence found in the hotel room, Tiffany was the first to speak. She sobbed as she revealed that she and her friends had robbed the elderly couple, but insisted they did nothing further to them. They then fled and started spending other people's money. Tiffany also admitted that there was another accomplice, a 19-year-old named Bruce Kent Nixon, who was paid $300 for his help. They never saw him again after that. Indeed, Bruce had agreed to participate in the crime for a promised payment. Afterward, he spent all the money on illegal substances. Finding him wasn't difficult, as he lived in Charleston and had not attempted to flee or hide. He was arrested at his parents' house. A careless phrase led Bruce to realize how serious consequences could be for his involvement. Consequently, he agreed to cooperate with the authorities to avoid facing the death penalty. What he revealed was horrifying. It all started in May 2005, when Tiffany went to deliver a payment for a car bought 6 months prior from the Sumners. She often visited them personally, because hospitable Carol and James invited her to stay for a night or a few days, offered delicious food, and even gave gifts if she brought friends along. There was always space for guests in the house and at their table. This time, Tiffany showed up with her new boyfriend and were warmly invited to dinner. Since it was late, the couple ended up staying overnight at the Sumners' home. During the meal, the Sumners discussed how they had settled into their new place. Carol inadvertently mentioned that they had nearly $100,000 left after selling their house in Charleston, implying they could comfortably enjoy their retirement without any financial worries. With this revelation, Carol unwittingly sealed her, and her husbands Tiffany and Michael exchanged looks. That night, while still at the couple's house, they began plotting how to obtain that substantial amount of money. In the morning, Tiffany and Michael bid farewell and returned to South Carolina. Over the next 2 weeks, they found accomplices, assigned roles and responsibilities, and began executing their plan. On June 6th, Tiffany rented an inconspicuous car while Bruce and Alan stole 4 shovels from an unspecified location. Together, they drove to a secluded spot in the suburbs of Jacksonville and started digging a deep hole intended as the grave for the Sumners couple. On July 8th, Tiffany purchased rope and duct tape from a hardware store and handed these materials over to her accomplices. That evening, Bruce and Alan arrived at the prospective victim's home under the pretense of needing assistance and asked if they could make a phone call from inside. Despite finding them strange, decided to let them in, thinking they genuinely needed help. Once inside, Bruce and Alan immediately attacked Carol and her husband when he responded to her screams. They bound the couple's hands and feet with duct tape, blindfolded them, and demanded information about any money or valuables in the house. Under severe threats of torture and death, The summoners provided details of their bank accounts and PIN codes for their cards in hopes of being spared. However, once this information was obtained by the intruders, 2 additional accomplices entered the house. They helped drag Carol and her husband into their backyard before stuffing them into the trunk of their family car. Alan drove their Lincoln, with Bruce seated beside him, while Tiffany and Michael followed close behind, in a rented Mazda RX-8 as part of their sinister plan. While on their way, they encountered a police patrol that might have tried to stop the car with the couple in the trunk. The second car was supposed to divert attention by speeding up or blatantly breaking rules. However, no one appeared in their path, so both cars reached the destination safely. In the trunk, James managed to free his arm. He removed the bandage and duct tape from his face, and also from his wife's face to prevent suffocation. There wasn't much more they could do. Their surprise, bewilderment, and shock were immense when the trunk lid opened, and among their captors were Tiffany and her boyfriend, who had recently visited them. The captives were led several dozen meters through the woods to a prepared grave. They were then simply pushed into it. The couple pleaded desperately for their lives, but the young criminals proceeded otherwise. They killed the couple in a brutal manner by burying them alive. According to Bruce, it took about an hour for them to cover the bound elderly people with earth, while they cried, confessed their love for each other, and said goodbye. An examination later showed that the spouses died of suffocation. Pieces of soil in which they were buried were found in their mouths, respiratory tracts, and even stomachs. After completing this gruesome act, the outlaws abandoned the Lincoln in the woods and returned to town in a rented car. They went to the Sumer house where they took valuable items and then returned to South Carolina to start spending their loot. However, after 2 days, all stolen cards were blocked. For days later, all participants in the crime were taken into custody. Bruce Nixon was the only one who fully admitted his guilt from the beginning, and agreed to cooperate with investigators, hoping for leniency. He revealed where the spouses were buried and detailed everything that happened on that awful night. Tiffany claimed that her boyfriend Michael had lost his mind and initiated the crime. When he heard about the substantial amount of money retained by the summoners after the sale of the house, her lawyer argued that the girl was an accomplice and not directly involved in the murder herself. Jackson and Lindell opted to stay silent, but they collected evidence compellingly. The jury didn't think Tiffany Cole's innocence, since she participated in creating the criminal plan, rented a car, and devised a diversionary tactic if they were chased by police. She even helped dig a grave for the spouses. Furthermore, she pawned stolen items and joyfully spent money, as evidenced by numerous photos of her in purchased clothes and in a limousine rented to celebrate their illicit success. As a result, Bruce Nixon was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Jackson, Tiffany, and Lindell received the death penalty. Despite filing multiple appeals and grievances, all were denied, leaving the sentence unchanged. However, in 2023, 18 years after their heinous crime, that very same death sentence had yet to be carried out. Little is known about Brian's childhood because his parents and lawyers made concerted efforts to protect many of his personal details. However, by piecing together information revealed during his 2023 trial, we can sketch a rough profile. Brian was born in 2002 and exhibited an early interest in death-related topics. He had a history of animal abuse and derived pleasure from watching particularly gory content. The timeless question in such cases is this: did exposure to morbid material shape his personality, or was he inherently inclined toward darkness, with violent videos and games simply amplifying his existing tendencies? As Brian reached secondary school, certain disorders became apparent. He experienced severe mood swings and often preferred isolation when his peers were socializing. He rarely attended parties and had a notably cynical attitude. At 15, a family doctor diagnosed him with depression after a series of consultations. A few years later, he complained of severe headaches, prompting a CT scan to rule out clots, tumors, or other abnormalities. The results were normal, but the migraines persisted, causing him ongoing distress. Despite his evident frustration with these medical treatments, Brian remained cooperative, often ending each consultation with a resigned, half-hearted smile. Psychotic disorders were ruled out, but other concerning behaviors emerged. A counselor contacted by Brian's mother to help him cope with the death of an uncle observed that Brian showed little empathy for the loss. He admitted he was tired of pretending to feel sad about things that didn't affect him. Over time, Brian's counselor noted his constant questioning of why hurting or stealing was wrong, indicating a disturbing lack of moral understanding. He displayed no empathy for minorities, regarding transgender individuals as less than human. It became evident that Brian harbored a significant, concealed hatred. On multiple occasions, he was known to exploit the vulnerabilities of his peers to mock them. All these observations paint a troubling picture of Brian's mental and emotional state, despite his mother's persistent efforts to seek help for him. Before turning 18, Brian visited the Vocational Rehabilitation Division. The reason was that he claimed he couldn't comprehend how his decisions impacted his future or the lives of those around him. During this time, a third doctor met with him and asked about his future goals. Brian quickly listed his key influences: Adolf Hitler, Columbine shooters Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, serial killer Ted Bundy, and former Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin. The doctor, unfazed, took notes and quickly diagnosed Brian with a low level of autism. She requested further tests to explore his darker thoughts. However, Brian soon found a job and many of these tests were never conducted. Could these tests have predicted what Brian was about to do? That's a question that remains unanswered. Brian spent several months working various roles at a supermarket chain. One afternoon, he confided in a coworker that he believed he had no friends and never would. The coworker smiled and reassured him that everyone there was his friend. "There are only my friends out of pity," Brian replied before getting up and continuing with his tasks. In a way, his comment held some truth. Everyone around Brian felt a mix of concern and pity for him. Despite his outburst of anger, he seemed to be in emotional pain and frequently sighed. Many saw him as a ticking time bomb, though no one expected what he would eventually do. From what has been revealed, Brian's mother was particularly worried about his well-being. She constantly sought out professionals who could help him and showed concern whenever someone spoke about him. However, after the incident, many agreed that it was in the privacy of his home where Brian's cries for help were no longer heard. Brian's parents admitted that at some point, talking about crimes became an uncontrollable obsession for him. Whether during dinners, family gatherings, or outings, Brian always found an excuse to bring up the topic. He would directly and unambiguously declare that he was planning to kill someone. But Brian's parents, either out of negligence or an inability to accept the truth, convinced themselves he was joking. They even tried to reassure each other, suggesting that Brian's obsession might be the precursor to a career as a forensic investigator or police officer. In their more optimistic moments, they envisioned their son solving crimes or conducting autopsies that would uncover mysteries. However, their optimism would falter when Brian sat in front of them, grinning from ear to ear, and casually discussed ways to dispose of a body. Though his words frightened them, Brian would quickly dismiss their fears by claiming he was merely showcasing his dark sense of humor. He would then head off to work, leaving his parents with a lingering chill. That chill grew more intense as other troubling signs emerged. In the last days of February 2021, Brian's mother felt a spontaneous sense of relief. For over a week, Brian hardly mentioned anything about murders or dismemberments. He seemed more talkative about everyday matters, asking about their work and showing interest in household affairs. He even appeared enthusiastic about his future. His mother recalled the doctor's words, suggesting that Brian's fascination with death might be a phase that would suddenly vanish. But Brian's father was not so convinced. He suspected this newfound calm might be the proverbial quiet before the storm. In hindsight, he wasn't wrong. The storm was just beginning. On the last day of February, Brian's father got into the car that Brian often borrowed and found a wallet under the seat. It was clear at first glance that the wallet didn't belong to any family member. His initial thought was that it might belong to one of Brian's friends or a girl he had dated. But he knew deep down that Brian didn't socialize much and didn't have an active romantic life. With trembling fingers, He opened the wallet and found a driver's license belonging to a man named Warren Barnes, nearly 70 years old. Why was it there? With his heart pounding and fear gripping him, he nervously confronted Brian, unsure of what chilling revelation might come next. Brian calmly explained that he had found the documents on the street. Noticing his father's paranoia, Brian even joked that if he had killed Warren, he wouldn't be so foolish as to leave incriminating evidence in the car. Oddly enough, this logic seemed to make sense to his father, who reluctantly accepted the explanation. But the uneasy peace lasted only a few hours. Later, Brian's mother found a red stain on the car upholstery. Once again, Brian laughed it off, claiming it was paint from a special effects course he had enrolled in. Desperate to believe him, his parents clung to his explanation, their minds racing with doubt and fear. Were they losing their grip on reality? Were they so afraid of their son becoming a monster that they saw signs where there were none? Did that make them worse monsters than their son? They felt guilty for suspecting the boy they had raised, who clearly needed help and seemed incapable of harming anyone. Their doubts made them feel ashamed. Despite this, Brian's mother couldn't shake her instinct that something was wrong. The next day, she took advantage of his absence to enter his room, later claiming she was just trying to tidy up. Whether that was true or she was searching for secrets waiting to be uncovered, she started looking around. After checking under the bed and in drawers, she opened Brian's closet and found a plastic container with bags inside. The bags emitted a nauseating odor that filled the room, making her stomach churn. As she cautiously approached, she noticed maggots crawling out of the seams, their writhing bodies a horrifying testament to the sinister contents within. Horrified and acting on instinct, she took the bags to the kitchen sink. Fighting back nausea, she opened them with a cloth. What she saw made her nearly faint. Barely able to stand, she made 3 calls. The first was to her husband, asking him to come home immediately. The second was to Brian, telling him to come home no matter what he was doing. They needed to talk. The third call took the most time. She dialed 911 and, through sobs, told the operator she had found a head in her 19-year-old son's closet. The operator assured her help was on the way and urged her to stay calm. When the police arrived, the sequence of events that unfolded was recorded and remains chilling to those who watch it. It's just a few seconds, but enough to make many lose faith in humanity. Brian spoke about what he did with a chilling lack of emotion. That same day, he was arrested. He was brought to the police station for questioning. His mother was also subjected to interrogation. After some time, he began to reveal some horrific truths. His trial took place nearly 2 years later in January 2023. On the stand, he repeated what he had told those taking his testimony over the months. Even during his initial confession, he appeared almost happy as he recounted his crime. Brian had decided to bring his homicidal fantasies into reality and devised a plan. From reading about serial killers online, he learned the importance of choosing his victim carefully. To avoid getting caught, he needed to target someone who wouldn't be missed, reducing the risk of immediate suspicion. This led him to conclude that his best option was to kill a prostitute or a homeless person. He began patrolling his neighborhood at night, armed with a kitchen knife, driving slowly and watching intently. He studied locations, times, observed routines, and took notes. Gradually, he identified more isolated areas and the least patrolled blocks. His obsession grew, and by February 27, 2021, he had become a predator on the hunt. That night, Brian found his target, a homeless man sleeping under a bridge near Crossview Avenue. Without hesitation, Brian acted on his sinister plan. He activated the vehicle's hazard lights and stepped out with a determined stride. There was no hesitation or moment of reflection. Brian approached the man sleeping on the ground and attacked decisively, killing him with a knife. According to his account, the victim didn't even wake up. The cuts were so precise that he bled out almost immediately. Once the body stopped convulsing, Brian stood there for a few minutes, watching. As the adrenaline began to subside, doubt crept in. Had he left fibers from his clothes on the body? What if, in the frenzy of the attack, he had left fingerprints? He couldn't allow that to happen. It went against everything he had learned. Ensuring no one was watching, Brian proceeded with what seemed the most logical action in his fevered state. He decapitated the victim and severed his hands, placing these parts into bags. He then put the rest of the body into his car trunk after removing the wallet and other documents from the man's pockets. Brian attempted to sink the car in the Colorado River before returning home. It was early morning by then. He locked himself in his room, his heart still racing. The next day, his parents reported the car missing, and Brian acted as if nothing had happened. He even started showing more affection and connection with those around him, as previously mentioned. In the following days, Brian spent hours drawing math, selecting locations to dispose of the incriminating bags. But he never got the chance. His mother discovered them first. Ultimately, things didn't go as Brian had planned. Moreover, Brian had chosen his victim poorly. Despite his assumption that the man's disappearance would go unnoticed, the reality was quite the opposite. Warren Barnes, 69, was a well-known figure in that part of town, and everyone had a great deal of affection for him. His disappearance was reported on February 28th by the owner of a bookstore on Crossview Avenue between 4th and 5th Streets. Warren was known for borrowing books every morning with meticulous regularity. When he missed his routine, people became worried. "When was the last time you saw him?" "Saturday, 5 o'clock. I said, "I'll see you tomorrow, Warren." And he was like, "Okay," meaning he planned on coming down on Sunday. And then he did not show up. The Colorado Sun revealed that Warren was known in Grand Junction as the Reading Man. He was a cheerful character who always chatted with neighbors about literature, recommended authors, and engaged in debates. When he saw others feeling down, he would tell them stories to lift their spirits, always parting with a smile and a wish for a good day. Nearby cafe members frequently gave him food and hot drinks, and other shopkeepers left chairs outside their stores for him to sit and read for hours. Occasionally, he did odd jobs around the neighborhood, earning a few bills to keep himself warm when the weather turned harsh. Brian's assumption that Warren's absence would go unnoticed was gravely mistaken. Warren also loved birds and prided himself on recognizing their unique songs. His family had often tried to persuade him to leave his transient lifestyle, but Warren always appreciated their concern while insisting he was content. He enjoyed living simply, respected by everyone around him. Warren believed that despite everything, things could turn out well. He sought nothing more than to have pleasant conversations each day before losing himself in his books and stories. Warren possessed an unusual innocence for his 69 years, devoid of malice and corrosive ambition. Everyone loved Warren. That's why his absence was immediately noticed, and the police were called when he didn't show up as usual. His sister Geraldine recounted how Warren had called her just hours before his death to wish her a happy birthday. He had done so in his cheerful tone, wishing her all her dreams come true. She was the last person he spoke to before lying down under the bridge, never to wake again. During the trial, a group of neighbors requested to testify about who Warren was. They emphasized that not having a home didn't make a person any less valuable or disposable. Two Colorado state psychologists who evaluated Brian for his insanity plea concluded he wasn't insane at the time of the murder. Another psychologist assessing Brian separately for the defense argued he had experienced a psychotic episode triggered by the attack on Warren, which subsided shortly afterward. Brian's mother took the stand, expressing her condolences to Warren's family through tears. She asked that Brian's sentence include mental health treatment, insisting her son was more than the sum of his mental defects and actions. She hoped Brian still had a chance to contribute positively to society. "Brian doesn't think or feel like the rest of us," she said before leaving the courtroom, her voice trembling. A palpable tension filled the room as everyone's eyes turned to the judge. It was time for the verdict. The judge in charge, with 37 years in the judicial system, including 16 as a judge, remarked that this was one of the most horrific cases he had ever encountered. Since Brian had confessed to the crime in detail, his lawyers based their defense on his mental health. They argued that Brian's declaration of wanting to become a famous killer was a sign of his insanity. They also cited his major depressive disorder combined with environmental stressors as factors leading to temporary insanity. However, the prosecution argued the opposite. They claimed Brian had meticulously planned the murder for months, and that the dismemberment of the body to hide evidence demonstrated cold, calculated, and meticulous behavior. On February 6, 2023, 20 days after the trial began, the judge delivered a clear decision: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Today, Brian is incarcerated at the Buena Vista Correctional Complex in Colorado. Mesa County Assistant District Attorney Trish Marr conveyed her sorrow over the brutal murder of Warren Barnes. She remarked, "Warren Barnes was taken from us in an incredibly violent manner. His friends, family, and the community deeply feel his absence. This case underscores the checks and balances of our criminal justice system. Justice was served when the jury delivered guilty verdicts, holding the defendant accountable for his atrocious crimes." Meanwhile, in November 2021, a monument was erected in Warren's memory near the main street of Grand Junction. Created by artist Tim Navin, the installation features a chair under the shade of a tree with a stack of books on the seat. Poetically, it serves as a fitting sanctuary. However, the absence of the reading man is still deeply felt in the daily life of the town, which remains shrouded in a bit more sadness following Brian's actions. Case of Jassi and Mithu. In 1994, in the month of December, in the city of Jagraon in the Ludhiana district of Punjab, a boy named Sukhender Singh Sidhu, his nickname was Mithu, after playing a kabaddi match, was standing at a rickshaw stand, waiting for a rickshaw to go back to his village. He had some friends with him who had come to support him during the match and to boost his morale. During that time in Punjab, there were some rickshaws like the ones you're seeing on your screen now. Kabaddi is a sport played between two teams in Punjab, where each player demonstrates their strength and smartness. Since Mithu was the #1 kabaddi player in his village, he was quite attractive and powerful. The rickshaw hadn't arrived at the stand yet, so Mithu and his friends were joking around. Suddenly, they noticed 3 women walking towards the rickshaw stand from the opposite road. As these 3 women approached, Mithu and his friends noticed that 2 of them were older, while the third one accompanying them was a very beautiful young girl. When the rickshaw arrived at the stand, all passengers got in and the beautiful girl sat on the back seat, while Mithu stood behind the rickshaw. During this journey, Mithu noticed that the girl kept looking at him repeatedly, and his friends also noticed this. However, Mithu couldn't talk to the girl, and as soon as she arrived in her village, she got off the rickshaw with her family. Once again, she looked towards Mithu, and for the first time, their eyes met. Besides, she smiled when she looked at Mithu, and in response, Mithu also smiled. Then both of them went their separate ways. When Mithu started doing some other work after reaching home, he heard a girl's voice screaming, "Please help. I need help." As soon as Mithu stepped out of the house, he saw that it was the same girl he had seen in the morning in the rickshaw and smiled at while she was leaving. After that, Mithu went to the girl, who had come on a scooter with her friend from her home. Here Mithu first greeted the girl with a hi, and then tried to start the scooter, but deliberately didn't start it. Then Mithu asked the girl her name and also told her his name. Actually, the girl's name was Jaswinder Kaur, but her nickname was Jassi. After that, Mithu said to the girl, "I want to talk to you." Hearing this, Jassi got confused because she didn't understand Mithu's words. So her friend who came with her translated Mithu's words into English for Jassi. Then the girl also said something in English, but Mithu didn't understand English. So Jassi's friend became a translator, and then both went to their respective homes. But from that day on, these two meet regularly. Gradually, Mithu also realizes that Jassi's maternal grandparents' house is the wealthiest home in her neighboring village. Besides, Jassi's maternal home and Mithu's small 2-room house were on the border of 2 villages, meaning Mithu's house was right behind Jassi's maternal grandparents' house. And Mithu knows this fact. After this idea, Jassi and Mithu eloped on March 15th, 1999, avoiding the scrutiny of their families, and got married in a Gurudwara, which is a place of worship for Sikhs. After the marriage, Jassi returns home as if everything is normal, and no one suspects anything. However, the relationship that Jassi's family had been considering for her breaks down for some reason. After staying in Punjab for 2 months and marrying Mithu, Jassi leaves for Canada with her family, but before leaving, she promises Mithu that she will come back soon. After going to Canada, Jassi and Mithu start talking to each other on the phone again, and by now, Mithu's house also had a telephone line installed. Months passed by in this way, but at the beginning of 2000, some relatives of Jassi who were in India come to know about Mithu and Jassi's marriage, and they immediately inform Jassi's parents in Canada. After this, their love story takes a sharp turn. From this point, Mithu's parents start pressuring him, while on the other hand, Jassi's mother and uncle begin pressuring her to break the marriage. However, neither Mithu agrees to it, nor does Jassi consent to breaking the marriage. Although Mithu is tempted by money, and Jassi is tempted by expensive things, cars, and the lure of a luxurious lifestyle, neither of them is willing to break the marriage. One day, Jassi's mother brought documents for Jassi to sign, so that Mithu could come to Canada. Jassi signed them all, unaware that the documents claimed Mithu had forced her into marriage and assaulted her. Later, Jassi came to Canada with her family. In reality, after Jassi signs this document, her family members send it to the India Punjab police. And based on it, an FIR First Information Report is registered against Mithu for abduction, forced marriage, illegal weapons possession, etc. And he is also arrested. After the arrest, Mithu is brutally beaten in jail and stays there for several months. Meanwhile, when Jassi fails to receive any response to Mithu's letters and is unable to contact him over the phone, she finally learns from a friend that Mithu had been jailed on charges of abduction, forced marriage, and other offenses. Here, Jassi discovers that her mother, Malak Kaur, had deceived her by obtaining her signature and implicating Mithu, causing significant difficulties for his family and friends. Furthermore, the Punjab police have arrested Mithu's family members from his home and imprisoned them as well. Then, a few days later, Mithu talks to Jassi where he says to her, "If you wanted to divorce Jassi, you could have just asked me. We got married with your consent, so why did you falsely accuse me?" After this, Jassi tells Mithu the whole story of how her mother and uncle got her to sign on the wrong paper deceitfully. But now, in Canada, Jassi was kept confined in her own home by her mother and uncle. But then one day, Jassi gets an opportunity and successfully manages to come to India with the help of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Then she comes to India and testifies in court that Mithu, his family, and his friends are all innocent. After this statement, everyone, including Mithu, is released from jail. Then Jassi stays in India for some time. This time, Jassi tells Mithu that she will never go back to Canada again. It is said that along with the police, Jassi's father and brother also helped her escape from home. Jassi had come to India and started living with her husband, but both of them also knew that Jassi's family members would not remain silent. That's why as soon as Jassi arrives in India, Mithu takes her away from home and they start living in hiding. Mithu took Jassi to her hometown in June 2000 while they were living at their home. Meanwhile, on June 12th, Mithu's family had organized a party in their village for Mithu and Jassi's wedding. So on June 8th, Jassi tells Mithu that she wants to go shopping. Initially, Mithu refuses because he knew there was still danger. So leaving the house wasn't right. But then, when Jassi sits at home upset, Mithu also feels maybe he did wrong. Jassi left her home in Canada to be with him, and he couldn't even take her shopping. After that, they both leave for the market in the afternoon. It takes them a bit longer to return home, so by the time they get back, it's already evening and the sun has set. Because of this, Mithu's family starts worrying about both of them. A while later, Mithu's family begins searching for them. However, during the search, they receive devastating news that shakes Mithu's family to the core. They find out that Mithu is in a very serious condition, admitted to the hospital, while there's no trace of Jassi. When Mithu's family members rush to the hospital, they find out that Mithu's condition is extremely serious, and he is unconscious. Jassi is not there. Then, after several hours, when Mithu regains consciousness, he first inquires about Jassi. Only then do they inform Mithu about Jassi. A few days later, when Mithu recovers, he explains the reason behind his condition. Mithu says that after reaching the market, Jassi did a lot of shopping, and then they both also had coffee together. Later, as they started returning home from the market, their scooter stopped on its own 3 or 4 times. Twice he sought help from a mechanic, and once he encountered his friend on the way. However, when the scooter started for the 3rd time, they noticed that they were being followed by 2 people on another scooter. However, after following the scooter riders for some time, they went ahead. But as soon as Mithu turned towards his village, he saw a car in front of him. At first, he saw from a distance that there was no one near the car. But as soon as he approached the car, suddenly 5 to 6 men came out and stood in front of the scooter. One of them even attacked them, which caused blood to start oozing from Jassi's head. After that, Mithu held Jassi and started fighting back against those thugs. But then one thug also attacked Mithu's head with a large rod from a nearby road. After that, Mithu became unconscious and those thugs kept beating Mithu, and finally, thinking he was dead, threw him into the nearby drain. A few hours later, late at night, some laborers passing by noticed Mithu lying there, and they picked him up and took him to the hospital. After learning this story, everyone sets out to find Jassi. This information is also given to the police, and now the police also begin to search for Jassi. After filing cases of assault and abduction against unknown criminals, the next day, on June 9th, Jassi is found, but she was not alive. In fact, Jassi had also been murdered and thrown into a canal which was 45 kilometers away from her hometown. When Jassi's body is retrieved from there, it is discovered that someone had brutally strangled her to death. Additionally, Jassi's body bore dozens of deep wounds, indicating that she had been tortured cruelly before dying. When Jassi's body is found, the Punjab police also contacts Jassi's family. However, Jassi's mother Malota and uncle Surjit Singh both deny recognizing the deceased as Jassi. But Mithu and his family, along with Jassi's father and brother, confirm that the body is indeed Jassi's. Now, the key question was who had inflicted such severe beating on Mithu and who had brutally murdered Jassi. After Jassi's body was found, the charge of murder was added to the case and the police embarked on the search for the criminals. During the search, the police managed to apprehend several major criminals in the vicinity based on suspicion. The police were so alert because although Jassi was Mithu's wife, she was actually a Canadian citizen. In the case of Jassi's death, suspicions quickly arose among certain individuals, and the police soon discovered who was involved in Jassi's murder. When the police rigorously interrogated these individuals, some criminals confessed to having committed Jassi's murder themselves and admitted to brutally beating Mithu as well. However, the question remains who instigated all of this. During the investigation, when the names of certain individuals come up, nobody trusts anyone. Anil Kumar, a gangster involved in this incident, implicates Inspector Jinder Singh of the Punjab police, claiming that he had given him a contract to kill Mithu a few days earlier. Now the police immediately start searching for Inspector Jinder Singh and manage to arrest him shortly after. When questioned by the police, Jinder Singh explains that he carried out the murder because he received a phone call from Darren Singh, Jassi's other uncle who resides in Punjab. Darren Singh promised him a group of 3 lakhs to kill Mithu. Now the police ask Anil Kumar why he killed Jassi when he was given the contract to kill Mithu. Upon revealing the truth, Anil Kumar and his accomplice leave everyone astonished. Anil Kumar explains that after beating Mithu, they thought he was dead, so they threw him into the nearby drain. Then, following Dharan Singh's orders, they took Jassi to an empty farmhouse. As soon as Jassi regains consciousness upon entering the farmhouse, she begins to search for Mithu. Upon inquiry, the roughs inform her that Mithu is dead. Now he starts talking to Jassi's mother, Malia, who tells him to wait for a moment, and she will tell them what to do next. After this, Jassi's uncle and her mother have a conversation, and afterward, they called the roughs again and instruct them to beat up Jassi and threaten her, besides asking her to testify against Mithu and come back to Canada. Despite being beaten badly by the roughs, Jassi still refuses to return to Canada and testify against Mithu. After this, the roughs once again talk to Jassi's mother and tell her that Jassi is not willing to listen to them. After this, Jassi's mother tells the roughs that if Jassi doesn't listen to anything, they can kill her too. Initially, the roughs refused to do so because their deal was only to kill Mithu for 3 lakh rupees. But Jassi's uncle, Surjit Singh, says a separate 3 lakh rupees will be given to them for Jassi's murder. After that, the roughs brutally beat Jassi, attacking her body with swords, knives, and pieces of glass. Jassi is tortured badly, and finally one of the roughs strangles her to death. Jassi dies, and her body is lifted and thrown into a distant canal. Following this revelation, 13 people, including Jassi's maternal uncle Darren Singh, who resides in India, are arrested in this murder case. They are charged with abduction and murder. Among other offenses, Jassi's mother, Malak Kaur, and her uncle, Surjit Singh, who live in Canada, are also considered prime suspects. Now, since the victim and the accused had relations in Canada as well, the trial of this case begins in both India and Canada. During the trial in India, it is proven that when Jassi refused to leave for Canada without Mithu, Jassi's mother, Malak Kaur, and uncle Surjit Singh, that if Mithu is killed, Jassi will surely come back. After this, Surj Singh contacts his brother Darren Singh in India and assigns him the task of getting Mithu killed. Afterward, he contacts Inspector Jenda Singh of the Punjab Police and seeks his assistance in this matter. Following this, Inspector Jenda Singh arranges a meeting between Darren Singh and a contract killer named Anil Varma. Subsequently, Anil, along with his gang, executes this incident. After a lengthy trial on October 21, 2005, the Sangur court sentences 11 out of 12 people as guilty. Among the convicted individuals are Jassi's other maternal uncle Dharan Singh, Police Inspector Joinder Singh, and contract killer Anil Varma. However, as time progresses, these individuals challenge the verdict of the lower court in the Punjab and Haryana High Court, where almost all the accused are granted bail one by one. In the end, only Jassi's other maternal uncle Darren Singh, Inspector Jenda Singh, and contract killer Anil Kumar are deemed guilty and sentenced to imprisonment. However, all the convicted individuals challenge this decision of the High Court in the Supreme Court. Subsequently, proceedings begin here as well, and on April 16, 2015, Darren Singh is acquitted and discharged. However, the rest of the defendants do not receive relief from here and their sentence remains upheld. Apart from this, before delving into what happens in the courts of Canada, let's take a step back in the case. Due to being severely injured in the attack, Mithu remains hospitalized for a long time. While staying in the hospital, Jassi's final rites are also performed. However, as soon as Mithu recovers and returns home from the hospital, a series of 7 cases are filed against him, one after another. There were some cases of illegal weapon possession with allegations of drug selling against Mithu, and pressure is also built by the police and Jassi's relatives to retract his statement and end the case. However, Mithu doesn't yield to anyone's persuasion and continues with the case. Meanwhile, in 2004, a woman accused Mithu of rape. Upon these allegations, Mithu is immediately arrested and sentenced to Lana Central Jail. Mithu stays in this jail for the next 4 years. But after 4 years, it is proven in court that the woman who accused Mithu of rape had connections with Jassi's maternal family, and she falsely accused Mithu for money. After this revelation, Mithu is released from jail after serving 4 years. However, despite this, there were still some cases pending against Mithu, and he continued to have dealings with the jail during this time. Besides Mithu, his brothers also faced different allegations, and behind these accusations was Jassi's uncle, Sarat Singh. When Mithu doesn't fear even fake cases and threats, around 2012, attempts are made to buy him off. In this case, Jassi's family offers Mithu 10 million rupees and a prime location of 14 acres of land to change their statement. However, Mithu remains steadfast and continues the fight for justice. Malak Kaur and Surjit Singh, the main suspects residing in Canada, were extradited to India for the trial of Jassi's murder case, which began on January 6, 2012 in Canada. The police in Maple Ridge arrested Jassi's mother, Mallard Cow, and her uncle, Surjit Singh, for conspiring against Jassi and arranging her murder. After 2 years, on September 9, 2014, the Supreme Court of British Columbia approves their extradition to India. Both suspects then appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada, which stays the lower court's decision and starts a new trial. On September 8, 2017, the Supreme Court of Canada orders Malak Cow and Surjit Singh to be sent back to India to face the charges. After the decision of the Supreme Court of Canada, 3 police officers from Punjab immediately depart for Canada to take the accused into custody. However, in the meantime, the accused once again file a petition for review against the court's decision. As a result, the Punjab police have to return empty-handed. Although the review petition provided temporary relief for a few months, finally, on December 11, 2018, the Supreme Court of Canada rejects the review petition, leading to their definitive extradition to India. After the completion of legal formalities, both accused were repatriated to India by Canadian authorities. Lynn Ernan was born in June 1956 in Madison, the capital of Wisconsin, USA. She was the only daughter of Lorraine and Robert Ernan. Her arrival was a joyous and significant event for the newlyweds. Robert, a World War II veteran, had started his own plumbing business upon returning to the United States, while Lorraine was involved in real estate sales. Their stable financial situation allowed them to provide Lynn with abundant opportunities. Robert and Lorraine were known for their warmth, and their home was always filled with joy and the company of friends and loved ones. It was no surprise that Lynn, from a young age, exhibited an outgoing and friendly nature. Her parents owned a cabin outside the city, which quickly became her favorite place. Lynn eagerly counted down the days to spend her school vacations there. For her father, these visits were perfect for a getaway, while Lorraine loved the peaceful and beautiful surroundings filled with lakes and tranquility. As a fervent nature lover, it was there that Lynn developed a special affection for animals. It wasn't long before this fondness turned into a passion for rescuing and caring for abandoned animals, with a particular soft spot for cats, making it common for her to always have a new pet. During her high school years, Lynn's keen interest in maintaining her appearance became evident to everyone. After graduating in 1974, she chose not to pursue a conventional university education, but instead decided to become a hairdresser. Encouraged by her father, Lynn opened her own salon, and in a short time, thanks to her people's skills, she built a good clientele. During this period, she formed a close friendship with Corinne Posa. Also from Madison, Corinne was married. The two soon discovered they shared an appreciation for the simple things in life. Corinne admired Lynn's ability to think carefully about her decisions and manage her finances prudently, leading to a life without unnecessary luxuries. In 1983, Lynn started a romantic relationship with Jim Kelleher. Although few details of his biography are known, it is clear that his friends saw him as a man with a free and adventurous spirit. These qualities quickly won Lynn over. With this in mind, the couple embarked on a lifestyle that involved constantly moving, always in search of natural settings that offered the tranquility they yearned for. However, after a few years together, their relationship deteriorated, leading them to separate. Despite this, their affection for each other kept them close friends. During this time, Lynn met Jennifer Flower, a native of Franklin, Wisconsin, who was a single mother to a 9-year-old girl named Jassi Sidhu. Lynn's kind-hearted nature led her to support both mother and daughter, taking a special interest in helping raise young Jassi, to whom she grew very fond. In 1998, Corinne gave birth to her only son, Anthony Pozo. From then on, he became a cherished member of Lynn's extended family. As he grew, Anthony enjoyed spending time with the Ernans, whether it was playing with Robert, who often shared stories about World War II, or watching classic movies with Lynn. In the summer of 2002, when Jassi graduated from high school, Lynn was bursting with pride. She would often show photos of the two of them at the graduation ceremony to visiting friends. 5 years later, when Robert passed away, the loss was so profound for Lynn that she struggled with depression. However, thanks to her unyielding spirit and optimism, she eventually overcame this tough period. Meanwhile, her beloved Jassi was having a hard time adjusting to adulthood. Deciding not to pursue a college education, she frequently changed jobs. But these were not the only troubling signs. In February 2010, seeking quick money, Jassi opened a bank account under the names of a neighbor couple and took out loans totaling $4,000. 2 months later, she committed even more serious acts of fraud, this time targeting her own mother. Without Jennifer's knowledge, Jassi took her social security card, IDs, checks, and car title and secured a loan of over $6,000. She also obtained a car title loan. When an arrest warrant was issued for Jassi, she attempted to flee and used fraudulent checks to pay for a hotel. However, the authorities caught up with her and she was arrested. Eventually, Jassi was sentenced to 2 years in prison before becoming eligible for parole. In 2013, the death of Lorraine was another significant blow for Lynn. During this painful time, the unwavering support of her friend, Corinne, along with visits from Jennifer and Jassi, who was now back on the outside after serving her sentence, were crucial in helping her heal. Lynn continued to live as she always had, focusing on saving money and enjoying the company of her beloved cats. Additionally, Lynn avoided using technology and did not own a cell phone or computer. She preferred handling her transactions with cash or checks, a method Anthony found outdated but also charming. Although she had a credit card, she used it sparingly and always tried to pay off any debt quickly. Meanwhile, Jassi had found a new job and started dating a man named Scott, who was single but had a daughter from a previous relationship. They soon decided to move in together and discovered a shared passion for casinos, visiting them twice a week. Jassi often spent all her money at these establishments. In early 2016, Lynn began experiencing various health problems, including back issues and heart and liver complications, which required constant medical attention. As a result, she spent most of her time at home. Initially, Jennifer took on the role of her caregiver, but eventually, it was her younger and more energetic daughter, Jassi, who assumed the responsibility. This gave Jassi access to Lynn's credit cards. Additionally, Lynn signed blank checks for her to assist with groceries and medications. In August 2016, when Anthony started university, he made it a habit to stop by Lynn's house on his way to campus. During their shared lunches, Lynn expressed her desire to support him financially with his studies. However, Anthony was adamant about not wanting their relationship to be seen as a ploy for financial gain. Despite this, Lynn always found a way to give him some money for his expenses. In contrast, during her frequent visits, Jassi began excessively using Lynn's credit cards, taking cash advances, making online purchases, and spending more than Lynn could afford. She squandered money in casinos and city bars, knowing Lynn did not closely monitor her finances. As Jassi's spending increased, her job performance declined and she was eventually fired. However, she kept this a secret so neither her boyfriend nor her friends knew about it. She even lied to Scott, claiming that Lynn was in intensive care due to a coma, giving herself more time to do as she pleased without being at home. Aware of her declining health and the possibility of needing to move to a nursing home, Lynn was worried about the well-being of her cats. She entrusted Jassi with their care and gave her power of attorney to manage her belongings if necessary. She also drafted her will, naming Jassi and Anthony as the main beneficiaries. She informed both of them, albeit separately, about this decision. From that moment on, Jassi focused on finding the best way to permanently remove her benefactor from the picture. The devious plan didn't take long to form in Jassi's mind. As she was responsible for administering Lynn's medications, she discovered that among them were eye drops containing tetrahydrosaline. After researching online, she learned that ingesting large amounts of this substance could be fatal. One night, after returning home visibly drunk from a bar outing with friends, Jassi told her boyfriend Scott that someone might have spiked her drink with eye drops, causing her drowsiness. It was late and Scott, also tired, dismissed her strange claim. In the last week of September 2018, Lynn was hospitalized and the medical staff recommended transferring her to a long-term rehabilitation unit. Lynn adamantly refused the suggestion, feeling ashamed of her physical condition. She forbade Jassi from mentioning her hospitalization to anyone, determined to avoid being seen in such a deplorable state. So unlike the woman she once was. That same week, remembering he had missed her birthday, Jim tried to reach out to her. However, Jassi answered Lynn's home phone and told him that Lynn was hospitalized and didn't want visitors. After being discharged from the hospital with a recommendation for home medical care, a first visit was scheduled for October 1st, 2018. However, Lynn postponed it to October 5th, choosing to remain isolated from everyone. By this time, Jassi had already spent around $144,000 from Lynn's accounts, but she wanted it all. On October 3, 2018, taking advantage of Lynn's negligence towards her health, Jassi visited her under the pretext of administering her medications. While preparing the usual pills, she secretly poured the contents of 6 bottles of eye drops into a glass of water and offered it to Lynn. The poison took effect, and Lynn gradually lost consciousness and died. Jassi meticulously staged the scene, spreading some crushed pills on a table near Lynn's body to give the impression of an overdose. She then called 911, reporting that she had found her friend unconscious and not breathing. When the responders arrived, they found Lynn lifeless in a reclining chair in the living room. In her statement to Officer Kelsey, Jassi explained her relationship with Lynn and her role as her caregiver, suggesting that Lynn, possibly overwhelmed by her health issues, had decided to take her own life. After transporting the body to the morgue, the police drafted a preliminary report considering the case as a possible suicide. However, during interviews with her close circle, Jim expressed shock at such a possibility. He stated that the woman he had known for many years would never make such a decision, as it simply wasn't in her nature. Anthony shared a similar view, telling investigators that despite Lynn's fragile health, he had always seen in her a strong optimism. When Anthony and Jassi met for the first time since the tragedy, Anthony couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between his own grief and Jassi's cold detachment and interest in the inheritance she was about to receive. Around this time, Jassi opened an account at a department store in Lynn's name to obtain a credit card. Shortly after, barely a week after Lynn's death, she announced a garage sale on her social media, selling Lynn's personal belongings, including her furniture. By the end of 2018, when Jassi appeared with expensive Christmas gifts, Scott became seriously alarmed. Just weeks later, the county medical examiner's office, which conducted toxicology tests on Lynn's body, found high levels of tetrahydrosaline in her blood, exacerbated by her other medications. The experts concluded that her death was not the result of self-harm or an accident, as it was impossible to ingest such a dose through normal eye use. The head of the medical examiner's office submitted the toxicology report to the authorities, prompting the sheriff's office to reopen the investigation. Once Jassi learned that the investigation had been reopened, she was keen to know the results, but the police refused to disclose them to her. In the following months, the investigation increasingly pointed to Jassi as the main suspect. On July 9, 2019, Jassi was arrested and interviewed by the police. During the interview, she tried to convince the authorities of her frustration over not knowing the cause of Lynn's death. The most striking detail was her claim that Lynn was a habitual user of both legal and illegal substances, although she was careful to note that this never prevented Lynn from being functional. Jassi alleged that while she always made sure Lynn adhered to her treatments, Lynn would abuse alcohol or pills, and during those times, thoughts of self-harm would emerge. In a subsequent interview, when questioned about her financial incentive for caring for Lynn all that time, Jassi explained that although there was never an official agreement, Lynn often gave her checks or allowed her to use her credit card. She emphasized to the agents that Lynn was always generous with her resources, a quality that stood out even more as she was aware of her impending end. During the third interview, the detectives played their strongest card, informing Jassi about the lethal tetrahydrosaline poisoning. Jassi immediately claimed that Lynn often used eye drops in large quantities, buying multiple bottles at once. The agents responded by pointing out that no such bottles were found at Lynn's residence and that the substance levels in her system were inconsistent with ocular use. Faced with the evidence, Jassi's explanations became increasingly contradictory. Although she initially found the idea of voluntary ingestion hard to believe, she then suggested that Lynn might have researched ways to end her life and settled on poisoning. Regarding the crushed pills found on Lynn's body, Jassi said that Lynn had difficulty swallowing. However, the detectives, suspecting it was a staged scene, made their thoughts clear to Jassi. In response, Jassi vehemently denied any involvement in Lynn's death, even suggesting that the toxicologist had made an error, claiming she had never heard of the lethal effect of simple eye drops. The authorities then decided to question Scott. When they mentioned that Lynn had been administered high doses of the eye drop component, Scott recalled Jassi's strange comment about someone possibly spiking her drink with eye drops, causing her drowsiness. This led to another interrogation where Jassi again denied knowing about the substance's action. However, this time she changed her initial story, alleging that Lynn had confessed to her about unsuccessfully trying to take her own life with pills. According to Jassi, Lynn began mixing the eye drops with vodka over several days, though it only caused her stomach discomfort. Jassi also claimed to have seen Lynn drinking this mixture the day before her death. She then recounted that on the morning of October 3, 2018, Lynn asked for a bottle of water that she had previously filled with the contents of 6 eye drop bottles and vodka. They argued because Jassi refused to give it to her. But eventually, thinking it wouldn't be lethal given Lynn's habitual consumption of the mixture, she relented. When confronted by investigators about why she hadn't mentioned this before and why she didn't alert anyone to prevent the fatal outcome, Jassi simply stated that if Lynn didn't want to live anymore, she had every right to act accordingly. Despite her efforts to evade responsibility and avoid charges, the review of the credit card statements revealed unusual spending patterns for someone like Lynn, who rarely left the house. There were transactions in bars and casinos, places Lynn never frequented. At this stage, Anthony's cooperation with the authorities proved invaluable as he highlighted Lynn's financial habits, which starkly contrasted with these expenditures. Jassi's criminal history of fraud and her gambling addiction further exposed her malicious intent to the police, making her motives to harm Lynn crystal clear. Consequently, she was formally charged with first-degree intentional homicide and 2 counts of grand theft, though she pleaded not guilty. She was held without bail with a bond set at $1 million. While in jail awaiting trial, formed a friendship with another inmate named Magdalena. Jassi confided in Magdalena that Lynn had died from an overdose of medications and even revealed that she had spent Lynn's money in casinos and on luxuries she otherwise couldn't afford. The process to bring Jassi to justice faced some delays, but finally commenced on October 24, 2023, after a 5-year wait. In his opening statement, the prosecutor painted an unflattering picture of the accused for the jury. In response, the defense, referring to Lynn as a mother figure to their client, countered by claiming that Lynn herself would have disagreed with the prosecution's narrative if she were present, dismissing it as an unfounded story. The attorney described Lynn as a woman with self-destructive tendencies, insisting on the theory of a consummated self-harm. However, the testimony of the medical examiner starkly contrasted with this narrative, asserting that the poisoning was undoubtedly caused by a third party. He emphasized Jassi's suspicious insistence on knowing the cause of Lynn's death. The prosecution revisited this point, suggesting that during her crime planning, Jassi hadn't anticipated a toxicology test for tetrahydrosaline on her victim. When Jim and Anthony took the stand, they both agreed that Lynn would never have allowed Jassi to squander her assets. Then an unexpected testimony emerged, further cornering the accused and solidifying the case against her. The significant revelations came from Magdalena, Jassi's cellmate. After 2 days of deliberations on Tuesday, November 14th, the jury delivered its verdict. As the judge read the jury's decision, Jassi broke down in tears, aware that she faced the possibility of a mandatory life sentence. Outside the courthouse, the prosecutor expressed his condolences to Lynn's family, satisfied with the verdict. Anthony expressed immense gratitude to the detectives and prosecutors for their relentless pursuit of the truth. In his own words, thanks to them, he could confirm what he had always suspected, that something was not right with Jassi. The sentencing hearing took place on Friday, April 5, 2024. Accompanied by her new attorney, Jassi spoke for 2 hours about what she considered a flawed legal process, claiming she had not received effective defense. Nevertheless, after her testimony, the judge sentenced Jassi to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years for the crime against Lynn Ernan. Additionally, she must serve 5 consecutive years for the 2 counts of theft, making her ineligible for parole until she is 80 years old. Furthermore, she was ordered to pay $386,000 in restitution through an escrow account for any money earned from interviews, book deals, movies, or documentaries related to the case. Present in the courtroom during the victim impact statements, Anthony had a few words for Jassi, wishing that her time behind bars would allow her to reflect on her actions. He said that, as he had hoped, her facade had finally ended and she could no longer deceive anyone. Although satisfied with the sentence, he expressed that it was impossible not to miss Lynn, who had been like an aunt to him. In honor of that love, Anthony plans to choose a monument where Lynn's remains can be laid to rest, seeking to provide her soul with the same tranquility and peace she always sought in life. Police immediately rushed to the scene of the crime, hoping to save 9-year-old Andrew and his 14-month-old sister, Naomi. An unknown man had committed a ruthless attack on the priest and his family. Leaving no traces behind, the criminal made it one of the detectives' most challenging cases in the detectives' careers. Fortunately, they managed to find witnesses who had seen everything. Their testimonies helped uncover the truth about what had really happened to the Hawkinsmith family. In 2013, in Danville, Kentucky, 35-year-old priest Michael Hawkinsmith, who had previously worked as a manager at a local pawn shop, had to take full control of the pawn shop due to the former owner's health condition. As a former priest, Michael had always been honest with people. He easily found common ground with others and was always willing to help. When he decided to get married, no one doubted his choice. Angie was his first love, and everyone saw her as a very sweet and kind girl. Michael literally worshipped the ground she walked on. When the couple had children, their relationship became even stronger. Together, they were a very happy family. As the Hawkinsmith family expanded, so did their business. The pawn shop, ABC Gold, games, and more became a successful family venture, attracting regular customers like broker Dan Smith, with whom they often conducted business on Fridays. Life seemed perfect for the Hawkinsmiths until one day in 2013, when an unknown man decided to disrupt their peaceful existence. 6 minutes after the phone call, police officers arrived at the scene of the crime. When they entered the building, their attention was immediately drawn to a large, bloody trail, which led them to Michael Hawkinsmith. Moments later, they found his 38-year-old wife, Angie. And on the other side of the counter, they discovered the third victim of the crime, 60-year-old broker Dan Smith. All 3 victims had gunshot wounds to the head and torso. A few minutes later, officers found Andrew Hawkinsmith and his little sister Naomi hiding in a closet. The officers' accounts indicated the unimaginable horror these young children had endured. Suddenly, the 9-year-old boy and his 14-month-old sister were left orphaned, having lost both parents. Upon examining the crime scene, police found 14 spent .22 caliber shell casings and 3 intact bullets, along with a briefcase that belonged to Dan Smith. The victim's personal belongings and all the cash in the register were left untouched, suggesting that robbery was not the motive for the crime. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras in the pawn shop, posing a significant obstacle to the investigation. The police had no choice but to rely on finding potential witnesses to the crime. An employee of the nearby Rainbowy Cleaners was able to describe a car that had parked near the building that morning. It was a silver minivan driven by a large man with a thick beard. While one group of investigators searched the surrounding area, another informed the closest relatives about the tragedy that had befallen their loved ones. Michael's parents found it difficult to accept the circumstances that someone in their right mind could wish harm to their children. Nevertheless, they tried to find any positive aspect in the situation, and the fact that their grandchildren had survived could not but rejoice them. If they hadn't been for Andrew, they forget what it was worth. Soon, the tragic news reached the daughter of the third victim, Dan Smith. He was involved in buying precious metals and skillfully adapted to the specifics of his work, easily finding common ground with different people. His business involved handling large sums of cash, sometimes exceeding hundreds of thousands of dollars. This led the police to consider the theory that Dan Smith himself could have been the primary target of the criminal. Tracking the man's movements revealed that before he arrived at the ABC Gold, Games, and More pawn shop, he had visited Lawson's jewelry store in Harrodsburg, located 10 miles northeast of Danville. In the jewelry store, investigators found a surveillance camera positioned on the far wall to capture every visitor entering and exiting the store. They hoped that the recording would help them determine if anyone had been following Dan Smith. Smith entered the store at 8:16 in the morning, and there were no other customers in the building at the time. He was carrying the same briefcase that was later found at the ABC Gold, Games, and More pawn shop. After greeting the woman behind the counter with a smile, headed to the back of the store sometime later, Dan Smith reappeared on the footage, coming out from the back of the store, saying something to an elderly woman who had just entered, and then immediately leaving. It was a typical day in the life of the jewelry store. The external camera recording showed nothing suspicious. The police were left to helplessly monitor the man who had no idea he would soon be at the center of a tragic event. Meanwhile, 9-year-old Andrew Hawkinsmith was taken to the police station to give his testimony. Andrew described how he had been at the pawn shop with his parents when Dan Smith arrived carrying a bag full of money. While his father and Dan were talking, the stranger entered and immediately demanded the bag. According to the boy, Dan Smith immediately handed over his briefcase, after which the stranger shot him. My father asked him to stop, but he also shot him with a pistol similar to the one I play with, Andrew said. Meanwhile, the mother instructed Andrew to take Naomi to the back of the store and hide in the closet. Andrew took his little sister and hid. It was then that the criminal aimed the gun at Angie. I don't know who he is and why he did it, but it seems to me that the reason was money. The 9-year-old boy concluded. He described the stranger as a very tall man with a blonde beard that looked fake, matching the description provided by a witness from Rainbow Cleaners. To follow all possible leads, the police's next step was to thoroughly examine the business run by the Hawkinsmith family. It turned out that the ABC Gold, Games, and More pawn shop had another owner, Steve Devine. While he usually attended Friday deals with Dan Smith, he was absent on the tragic morning of September 20th. This information raised concerns, making determining his whereabouts a top priority. Steve Devine explained that he had developed an allergy that morning and was forced to cancel all his appointments, a story confirmed by his wife. The alibi and the fact that Steve Devine did not own a silver minivan helped to rule him out as a suspect. He also explained why there were no surveillance cameras in the pawn shop. According to him, the security system had been removed by the previous owner, Kenneth Allen Keith, and the new owners had not yet installed a replacement. 48-year-old Keith, like his deceased friend Michael Hawkinsmith, was a priest. Pastor Keith sold the pawn shop when he was diagnosed with brain cancer, but he remained the owner of another similar establishment, Gold Rush Buyers in Pulaski County, neighboring Danville's Boyle County. Michael's family revealed that he prayed for his friend every evening, hoping for his recovery. Their friendship, which began when Michael worked at a youth church camp, had lasted for 15 years. The Hawkinsmith family always held Pastor Keith in high regard, and for their son Andrew, he was like a beloved uncle. With no significant leads, investigators decided to try their luck in finding possible street surveillance systems near the ABC Gold, Games, and More pawn shop. They found a camera on the office building of the real estate office, Danville Rentals. The surveillance footage captured a silver minivan at 8:45 in the morning, but the image was too blurry to identify the license plate or the make of the vehicle. Once again, police had to rely on the witness's testimony from Rainbow Cleaners, which described the car as an old model with a distinctive square body shape. The car in the video clearly showed a square rear bumper that matched this description. The color, type, and shape of the car all indicated that the police had found the criminal's vehicle. They continued to search for surveillance systems farther and farther from the pawn shop. At 8:17 in the morning, the camera at the local Ephraim McDowell Hospital captured the same vehicle. And finally, investigators were able to determine that it was a silver Dodge minivan. Michael and Angela's family organized a candlelight vigil in their memory. Hundreds of compassionate people attended that evening, demonstrating the depth of love for their lost ones. Similarly, like the Hawkinsmith family, Dan Smith's close relatives were outraged that the whims of another had led to the loss of their loved one. Despite their grief, they chose not to let anger overshadow their other emotions and joined in the funeral proceedings. Meanwhile, the Danville Police Department appealed to the public for any information about the criminal or his vehicle. Immediately after this, on September 24th, the police received a call from Tracy Harold, a pastor in Warren, Michigan. He claimed to be a friend of Kenneth Keith and mentioned that during their last conversation, they touched on the topic of the murder in Danville. And at that moment, Mr. Keith seemed to change. Pastor Kenneth Allen informed his friend that on that particular day, he was driving to Danville for medicine for his wife. He also expressed a sense of guilt for what happened, as he had given Michael Hawkinsmith the opportunity to become the owner of his former business. Keith put forward the theory that Dan Smith himself could have been the main target of the attacker. Keith explained that Dan would come to him every Sunday to pawn all his gold, always carrying large sums of cash with him. Keith speculated that someone might have tracked Dan's route and ultimately targeted him, but there was more to the story. As it turned out, the pastor's relationship with the Hawkinsmith family was not as everyone had believed. These words raised suspicions, leading to Pastor Keith being added to the list of suspects. To verify his alibi, investigators decided to review the surveillance footage from the Good Neighbor Pharmacy, where, according to the pastor, he bought medicine for his wife. At 9:24 in the morning, a man entered the pharmacy, indeed Pastor Kenneth Allen Keith. But he looked nothing like the man who had committed the triple attack just minutes earlier. He was not wearing a green jacket or a beard, which were distinctive features of the assailant. However, this did not rule out his involvement in the attack. There was a 7-minute gap between Andrew Hawkinsmith's call to the police and the pastor's arrival at the pharmacy. The police decided to check if it was possible to travel from the crime scene to the Good Neighbor Pharmacy in such a short time. They found that the trip took about 5 minutes in total, so it was plausible to commit the murders, quickly get into a car, and reach the pharmacy to establish a solid alibi. The key clue was that Pastor Keith had an unregistered 2008 Dodge minivan, which was silver. However, all the evidence found was circumstantial, and it was not enough for an arrest. So investigators turned to Tracy Harold to participate in a series of fake phone calls aimed at the suspect. Luckily, Tracy agreed. During these calls, Pastor Keith finally revealed his true feelings towards the Hawkinsmith family. Then, what everyone had been waiting for happened. Keith began discussing details of the case that had not been made public. Following that, Pastor Kenneth Keith explained that he left Danville and returned to Somerset. He then took his car to the car wash to prepare it for a planned family vacation. At 10:50 in the morning, Keith was seen on camera walking down the hallway to the cashier's counter. With a noticeable smile, it seemed clear that he was not involved in the dreadful crime that occurred earlier that morning. The external camera footage covering the parking lot showed Pastor Chameth leaving the car wash in the same silver Dodge at 11:25. Matching all the images previously obtained from various surveillance systems in Danville. At that point, they had enough evidence to arrest the suspect. He was offered a polygraph test to prove or alleviate his involvement in the pawn shop crime. But his response was rather unusual. Keith stated that he would not be able to pass the polygraph successfully because during his military service, he was tasked with eliminating 3 individuals. The investigators obtained a warrant to search Kenneth Allen Keith's pawn shop, where they discovered a fake beard and a significant amount of cash. The police could not find any legitimate explanation for how he acquired most of the money. They also found bundles of bills wrapped in a ribbon with the name of the bank that issued them, revealing Dan Smith as their client. Further investigation revealed that the money found in Keith's pawn shop had recently been withdrawn from the account of a dead broker. Additionally, several .22 caliber casings were found in Keith's pawn shop. According to ballistics analysis, they were fired from the same weapon used to shoot the parents of young Andrew and Naomi. Based on all the evidence found, Kenneth Allen Keith was charged with 3 counts of deliberate homicide and first-degree robbery. It turned out that Pastor Keith believed that Michael Hawkinsmith and Steve Devine had conspired to get rid of him from the business. Knowing that Dan Smith carried large sums of money, Keith decided to exact his revenge on the day of their planned meeting at the pawn shop. Keith aimed to mislead law enforcement into thinking the crime was motivated by robbery. In reality, Michael Hawkinsmith and his partner, Steve Devine, had no involvement in the imagined conspiracy against Keith. During the investigation, no evidence of discreditable activities by Michael Hawkinsmith and Steve Devine was found. On September 20th, the criminal arrived in Danville in his silver Dodge Caravan. He circled the pawn shop for a while until he noticed Dan Smith's car parked nearby. The first victim was the broker himself, followed by Michael and then Angela Hawkinsmith. The pastor then took all the cash from Dan Smith's case and calmly left the crime scene, stopping at the Good Neighbor Pharmacy to be captured on its surveillance cameras and secure an alibi. His decision to go to the car wash was another attempt to remove traces and destroy any evidence that might have been left on his vehicle. In 2017, just before the trial, Kenneth Allen Keith pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Before the trial, investigators obtained medical documents from the Veterans Hospital and discovered that the pastor had never had a brain tumor. How could someone who seemed so spiritually inclined commit such a heinous crime? Furthermore, how was he going to live with the knowledge of what he had done? 41-year-old Rose Manise lived in Bristol County, Massachusetts. On March 23, 2001, Rose's father entered her home to pick her up for a doctor's appointment. He found her body on the bathroom floor and called the police. Investigators found that her purse was emptied out on the floor and an undetermined amount of cash was stolen. The autopsy report described significant trauma to her head, including skull fractures. The weapons used to inflict the injuries were a seashell, fireplace poker, and a cast iron kettle. Because of the money stolen from her, police theorized that the motive was burglary. There was, however, no sign of forced entry into the home. This possibly meant that Rose knew her attacker. Investigators found DNA on the seashell, but DNA was not advanced enough yet to test it. In 2019, investigators with the DA's office and state police took another look at Rose's case. They figured that because the seashell's spiky exterior made contact with her, then the culprit most likely put his fingers inside the shell to hold it. Authorities then finally found sufficient DNA for them to create a DNA profile. They were then able to confirm that the DNA belonged to David Reed. He is Rose's half-brother. He also served as a pallbearer at her funeral. Officials say that he beat a woman on June 10, 2003, while she was seated in his truck. He then shoved her out of his vehicle, stole her pocketbook, and left her in New Bedford, Massachusetts. The woman pressed charges and police set out to find Reed. More than a month later, during a police chase, Reed rammed his truck into a law enforcement car, injuring an officer. Cops caught up, but he fled Massachusetts before the trial in 2004. Reed lived on the run for a decade in Florida, Hawaii, and Alabama. In 2015, authorities caught him, but the charges against him had to be dropped because the woman he beat passed away 6 months earlier, and there was not enough evidence against him. He could still be charged with attempting to flee from officers, ramming his truck into a police cruiser, and bail jumping. He was sentenced to 3.5 to 4 years in prison. It was then that his DNA was taken and why they could later match it to the DNA found on the seashell. In January of 2022, officers arrested Reed for taking his half-sister's life, and they also brought back their case regarding the woman he beat. 63-year-old Helen Margaret Brooks lived in Apple Valley, California in 1985. She was a well-liked woman who modeled for Lolo's fashion boutique at the Apple Valley Inn. On July 5, 1985, Helen's friends and coworkers became alarmed after not hearing from her in a few days. They then went to her home in Apple Valley Gardens Apartments. Inside of her apartment, they found Helen's body. She had been strangled. Investigators collected DNA evidence from the scene, but were limited to the DNA technology of the time. Investigators learned that 37-year-old Robert Eugene Wertman met Helen in the days prior to her life being taken, and was in her apartment between July 3rd and July 5th. Wertman was interviewed by investigators. He said that he had no knowledge of what happened to Helen, and denied he went into her apartment. Investigators could not prove that he was responsible in any way, so the case went cold for many years. Over the years, several interviews and polygraph tests were conducted, but it did not bring investigators any closer to solving the case. In 2009, cold case detectives re-examined the case and submitted items for DNA testing. A DNA profile for the suspect was developed, but did not match anyone in the DNA database. In 2021, investigators partnered with the FBI and made use of more advanced DNA technology. Finally, in 2022, they were able to confirm that Robert Eugene Wertman was indeed responsible for what happened to Helen. They found that he had quite an extensive violent criminal history in the years since he ended Helen's life. In August 1985, Wertman was arrested on suspicion of attempting to assault a woman at the Cocky Bull restaurant and bar on Highway 395 in Victorville. In 1991, a jury convicted him of assaulting a different woman at a bar in Apple Valley. In 1995, Wertman passed away while in prison serving his 22-year sentence. Investigators are sure that he is involved in many other crimes, and it is now being investigated. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.